Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Vexed, Negative Energy, out June 23rd on Napalm Records. This album has 13 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a UK metalcore alternative metal band. I'm not a huge fan of the design of this record. I honestly felt like the album could have been a little bit more blended. I do like the opening of the record. The first third of the album is really interesting, starting off with the intro track. An intro track that takes you into the album with ease, because this is a record that's all about aggression, all about intensity, and the first 2/3 of the record are consistently heavy and aggressive. So having an intro that doesn't necessarily offer that experience, but it sets the tone for what the overall mood of the album is going to be, is the best way to get started. The aggression and intensity that follows, it's welcomed. The problem is that it stays for too long in a very consistent way. And then when you look at the last third of the record, you see a lot more movement. The album changes quite a bit, musically, but also vocally. Predominantly vocally, with the clean vocals coming in and having more of a role. I would have liked to see some of those songs at the tailor end of the record blended into the overall experience of this album. This way you could have more ebbs and flows and not have this aggression and intense experience for 2/3 with no pauses, no breaks, and then you start to see some breaks coming in towards the tail end. It unbalances the record and unbalances the experience, and I prefer an album, if it's going to be this heavy, this aggressive across 13 songs, I like to have some pauses, I like to have some breaks in order for the overall experience to be more enjoyable, but also to be more dynamic. As far as the sound is concerned, this is a violent sounding record, especially when you consider its predecessor. This is definitely turned all the way to 11. It's violent, it's aggressive, it's intense, it's emotionally driven. It feels like it comes from a very deep place inside. So there's that connection with the band that it's hard to hide when the album is this raw. And it's not raw from a production sound, it's not raw from a mixing sound, it's just raw from the emotion that it carries. And it carries that emotion not just in the sound experience, but also in the lyrical content and definitely the vocals. But as far as the overall big umbrella of this record, heaviness is going to be the key dominating force from start to end, with a few changes here and there, but it stays heavy, it stays consistent. It's an album that has a lot of thickness, has a lot of volume, and it feels really powerful in how it delivers its music. It's also an album that, while putting the guitars up front in terms of dominating where the tracks are taking you and what's generating some of that thickness and heaviness, it doesn't keep the drums in the back seat. And this comes down to mixing and production. I thought from that point of view, the album really is on point. I love the fact that you feel how powerful the guitars are. Either thick riffs, thick sounds, or more penetrating, giving you some groove elements, allowing you to see them cutting through the overall thickness of this record, the overall fat of this record, and giving movement to the tracks, giving you different experiences, creating chaos at times, but a controlled chaos that has boundaries in terms of how far it can go. The guitars really push the envelope on this record. They have an incredible soundscape and they have an incredible fingerprint that becomes this synonymous across each and every single song. But the beauty of how the drums come into this picture allows them to be partners, not necessarily just two elements working one off the other, or one trying to elevate the other. No, this is a partnership. The way the guitars sound and the way the drums come and complement that sound, it's really important for the overall experience that this album offers. A really robust experience, but one that feels matched, that feels unified and not necessarily separated or segregated. This definitely gives quality to the record, but it also gives a consistent approach that, regardless of how much chaos and how much changes from song to song, you always find the same patterns coming up to the surface, and this duality and connectivity between the guitar sound and the drum sound really becomes the spinal cord of the entire soundscape on this album. Vocally, Megan is she's a beast, and I felt that this album showcases perhaps a little bit more of her unhinged side. She felt like she was living the moment with each and every single song. And I think that's the best compliment that I can give her vocally on this record, is that it felt emotionally driven. It felt unbalanced at times in a positive way. It felt like she didn't try to restrain herself. It was just very raw, it was very natural. And using harsh vocals, or her heavier side of her vocal range, I would say for 90% of this album, matches the overall design, it matches the overall intensity, it definitely matches the theme of the record and the lyrical content. She has a great delivery from that point of view. She adds so much intensity, so much aggression to an album that sound-wise already packed a punch. Her clean vocals really feel melancholic. She brings in a different aroma when she goes into that range, when she goes into that side of her vocal delivery. I honestly really enjoy that side of hers, because it's a side that feels a little bit more naked, a little bit more vulnerable, versus the more heavier side where she's in the offensive. I wanted to see more of that on this record. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of it. There is some, but not a lot of it, and it comes more towards the tail end of the album. You don't really see that much of it, or barely any at all, for the first 2/3, and I think that misses the point a little bit, because you can enhance the heaviness, you can enhance that exteriorization of your emotions a lot better when you have something to compare with. And when you go through 6, 7, 8, 9 songs where the vocal approach is very balanced, you start to lose track of where those emotions are coming from and where they're going. Having some clean vocals mixed into that journey allows you to see better the ebbs and flows, and allows you to see better where she is at one point and how can she then explode into the next. That is perhaps something that is lacking on this record, but you cannot say that she's lacking from an emotional point of view and for how good her delivery is across each and every single song. It's without a doubt a super aggressive, super heavy and intense album, and if that's what they were going for, they definitely reach it. But I think sometimes you have to take a step back. Creating a heavy album sometimes is not enough. You have to create a sense of direction in terms of where that heaviness is coming from and where you're pointing at. And at times this album loses a little bit of that. It concentrates too much within the moment and doesn't focus enough on what got you to that point. And that's maybe a small thing for some, but a big thing for me when it comes to listening to an album that offers this sort of theme and definitely this sort of musical performance. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with We Don't Talk About It. Super groovy, heavy track. I mean, it's really hard to define the guitar sound on this song. I think groovy is perhaps the best way to put it. But the guitar sound really weaves itself through the thicker sound and even through the thicker drum sound. The verses are more aggressive, choppy but direct. It has a little bit of an up and down, so it has a little bit of a chop to it. Stomping, if you will, but very direct in its approach. And then the chorus lyrically is super catchy. It's very catchy, it's memorable. Vocally, it's very layered, and that allows the chorus to distance itself from where you were in the verses. It creates a nice dynamic between these two worlds. They're not completely far away from one another, but there's enough in between them to create some ebbs and flows within the song that feels very balanced all around. Next, you have my favorite track on this record, Panic Attack, a song that both musically and vocally expresses so well the actual title of the track. This song feels like a panic attack. It sounds like you're having a panic attack. It's a great song. It has a lot of intensity, a lot of aggression, both musically and vocally. And like I said, it matches what the title of the song is all about. It has a great drum sound. The drum sound really comes through tremendously well on this song. And it still gives enough room for the guitars to have also a big sound, a big presence, allowing the melodic essence of the guitar sound to cut through some of the fat that creates that overall thickness. Vocally, the track is insane, and maybe that's why it becomes easily my favorite song on the record. It almost feels unhinged. Megan almost feels like she's losing control of herself. Typically what would happen during a panic attack, it's really well represented by her vocal delivery throughout this entire song. I love the sound, I love the vocals, I love how this whole song works as one, from title to sound to lyrics to vocals. Last but definitely not least, There's No Place Like Home. Great guitar sound, offering some grooves, some melodies, some great elements, allowing you to feel like it has perhaps a little bit of a heavier, straightforward sound, but also allowing you to feel like there is a path for you to take as a listener from beginning to end. The drums pack the sound in this song, really making the experience feel like it has substance, feeling robust. The vocals then sit on the top. This is a track that feels very layered from that point of view. Maybe one of the tracks where you can see the distance between vocals, drums, and guitars a little bit better. Normally, they're very condensed together, and you can feel all the layers around it, and you can feel the glue. You can see them expanding and contracting, but on this song, you almost can see them in 3 different lanes, working in parallel, but in 3 different lanes nevertheless. Super dynamic vocal performance, very layered as well, allowing you to feel like there's also a lot of movement within her vocal range, giving you more dynamics, giving you more energy to the overall track, to the overall performance. But this is a song that becomes all about guitars and vocals, both top notch. This is it. Vexed, Negative Energy, out June 23rd on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.